Today we're going to go on a bit of a crazy ride, so brace yourselves. Where do I start? Here, KEF LS50 in their passive version. And then in my rack, on the bottom, I'm powering those KEFs with probably one of the finer integrated amplifiers in the world. That's the Hegel H590 with a streaming board inside. Up from there, I've got the PS Audio NuWave Phono converter Phono stage, but that's not really going to factor in today. Next to it, I've got the Brooklyn Bridge, which I reviewed last week. But then above that, something very unexpected, a CD player. This is the Mohican, also from Hegel. So the Brooklyn Bridge from Mytek is a digital source, so a streamer, that feeds a DAC. And the Mohican from Hegel is also a digital source, CDs, a laser, that feeds a DAC. So essentially they kind of perform the same role. I've got them connected with their balanced outputs into the Hegel amp using the exact same balanced XLR cables. And these two things don't sound the same, but it isn't a matter of separation or detail. So what is the difference between the Brooklyn Bridge and the Mohican? Well, mainly it's in this layer, this almost like a frosting of glare that we hear on the Brooklyn Bridge. But we only notice it when the Mohican takes it away. So when I'm playing CDs versus streaming a FLAC file using Rune, the glare isn't there. Mark Jenkins said this to me once, Mark Jenkins of Antipodes Audio. He says it's a glare that sort of lifts the head. And he's right, it does, it kind of lifts you. When you listen to the CD, your imaginary line of focus when you're sort of watching the soundstage, it drops a bit. And that's especially noticeable with this album. Most people will know what this is. This is Radiohead's Amnesiac. I don't really need to tell you how amazing this is. Anyway, so with the CD version, I get a very, I guess it's a cleaner lower treble. It's less glary. Think of it like if somebody gets a water bottle and sprays a plant with a fine mist. That's what I mean by this glare. I don't want to overstate it, it's very subtle, but my job is to pull out the very subtle differences between two pieces of hardware. So for me, yes, the CD player, the Mohican, is more expensive, but I prefer it sonically, by quite a lot actually, to the Brooklyn Bridge. But it's not just about glare. It's about the way that percussion and drums sound through the Mohican versus the Brooklyn Bridge. For the CD player, they're more definite, more emphatic, more sure-footed. And instrument localization in the soundstage is more precise. Not in a cold clinical way, just in a more definite way. And I gotta say, this CD player has a considerably deeper soundstage than this streaming DAC. You get what you pay for. So these differences that I hear are repeatable with all sorts of music, like The Cure, Bright Eyes, Plastic Man. And these differences in the audiophile sense are significant because we chase that final like 1%, 2%. But we got to be careful because I really don't go in for the language that we see a lot online, like, oh, the Mohican blows the Mytek out of the water, or the differences are night and day. No, they're not. They're not night and day. You need a very, very transparent, revealing audio system to hear these things. For me, generally, through the Hegel CD player, with CDs obviously, music sounds more believable than it does streamed to the Brooklyn Bridge. But that believability delta is larger than that between a CD quality stream and a high-res file. This story about the Mohican and the Mytek didn't start here. It actually started with these two PS audio boxes. On the bottom we have the DirectStream DAC, and on the top we have the DirectStream memory player, which I've actually had in my house for 2 years. I never touched it. I thought, no, I don't do CDs. I never do CDs. But when I was reviewing the ELAC Navis, which you can see behind me here next to the Kefs, I thought, well, I'd bought those CDs for the Innuos review. I thought, what the hell, I'll just try it. I'll just plug it in. I'll take the sticker off the IEC socket because that was over it for 2 years. I plugged it in and fed the DirectStream DAC using the I2S connection at the back, just to see, like, how does the CD transport, or rather in this case it's more than a CD, but how does this optical disc transport compare to the network bridge version 2 inside the DirectStream DAC? So I've got the DirectStream DAC feeding the ELAC Navis over balanced XLR wire, and then obviously the network bridge is inside this DAC, so that's streaming over Ethernet, and then this memory player is connected to the DAC using I2S. So what I've got here, Speedy J's Ginger. It's a kind of home listening electronic music from the 90s. Future to the Left, kind of like proto-punk. Very, very exciting album. Very aggressive album by most people's standards, especially in the audiophile world. Goodbye Mr. Mackenzie. This is 80s indie rock. This was Shirley Manson from Garbage's first band. Look at how young she looks there. Amazing. So with Fish Heads and Tails by Goodbye Mr. Mackenzie, I've got the Rune version here. I've got the CD here. Put it into the player. And I've been listening to music like this for many, many weeks now. You might be surprised to learn, I don't know, maybe you will, maybe not. You might be surprised to learn that this CD player as a digital source into the DirectStream DAC over I2S sounds better than the network bridge that's built into the DAC. So what do I mean by better? Well, here the issue of the top end glare doesn't present at all. But what we do get from the CD disc transport is better inked tonal colors and a stronger sense of rhythmic alacrity, and really music just sounds more alive through this CD player than the internal streaming board inside the DAC. Again, the delta is this much, but it's a delta that high-end audiophiles like me care about. I think what's really interesting is that this CD transport sounds as good as the Innuos Zenith SE music server streamer firing into this DAC over USB. They cost about the same, so that's kind of, what is it to be expected? I don't know, because this is a completely different way of playing a file. But to me, it's hard to separate the two, but definitely these two are much better than the network bridge card inside the PS Audio DAC. Back with the Hegel, the Mohican, if we use this as a digital transport and feed a bit of signal directly into the H590 amplifier, it just doesn't quite sound as, I guess, as magical, really. That's a bit of an extreme term. I'm certainly not going to say musical. It doesn't sound quite as rich as the analog output straight into the amp. But I think what's also interesting, again, is that as a digital transport, this does slightly better the sound of this wired for sound music server streamer. What I mean by that is that it's very wet sounding, like this wired for sound. Wet means to me like the flow of music is very obvious. But I think the wired for sound is already a sterling performer in that department. But the Hegel goes up a notch again, and that manifests itself in music really in the blat of horns. So if I listen to something like spiritualized laser-guided melodies, in the horn section, it sounds wetter. That's what I mean by wetter. It doesn't sound as dry. Like some digital transports can sound a little bit dry. That's not always a problem, but with my system here, I prefer the wetter sounding ones, and the wired for sound is wet. It sounds silly, doesn't it, really? But I'm going to run with this. It sounds wet. The Hegel sounds a little bit wetter, a bit smoother, a bit richer. And really, I prefer that. I prefer either of these digital transports feeding the amplified streaming board over and above adding the Brooklyn streaming DAC. Now that might sound kind of surprising, but I think really what I'm getting to here is that often we think that digital audio is fixed by just upgrading the DAC, upgrading the DAC, upgrading the DAC. But here, as we found with the PS Audio over here, the transport, the streamer, matters just as much. So here in my office, I have a pair of Genelec active loudspeakers fed by a Chord DAVE. So it's an extremely high-end setup, but I can't go putting an enormous CD player on the desk here. But I can put Pro-Ject CD Box S2, which is this tiny CD player. This only has a TOSLINK output, so it goes into the DAVE. This is basically a computer style optical reader that feeds a small board computer in here and then sends a signal out through a DAC, through the analog outputs, which I'm not using, and through the TOSLINK output, which I am using for my Chord DAVE DAC here. So I can put a disc in. I've got Fuse's dimension intrusion, and click play. Now you can possibly hear one downside of this Pro-Ject player in that you can hear the disc spin when you're very close to it. That's not really a problem if I'm playing music really loud, certainly not a problem if I'm listening to headphones. Here I've got the Mr. Speakers Eon open, and I would use those with the Chord DAVE as well. But it's a small footprint player. I'm not going to actually make any great claims about its audible prowess. This CD player is not some kind of giant killer. I hate that phrase as well, but it's not. People often say that the best Neil Young and Crazy Horse live album is Live Rust. I disagree. I think it's Weld. And if I listen to this fantastic album via the Pro-Ject and the DAVE, I really don't feel I'm taking any hit to sound quality compared to streaming it to the ALLO DigiOne and then having that go spit it out into the DAVE. For me, these two streamer CD players, these two things sound pretty much the same. I don't go in for the notion of blacker backgrounds. To me, it says nothing about the spaces between the notes, between the music. In the case of CD players or CD transports, I would rather say that these better digital sources give us greater soundstage illumination across the board. So not just the players themselves, but the spaces between those players. And that's what I find generally, whether it's a server or a CD player, that level of stage illumination goes up. And for me, I think the lesson that I've learned in the last, 3 months of just playing CDs through different system configurations, through different speakers, is that we should not write off the CD yet. I think one of the big failings at the moment of the audiophile community is the obsession with high-res audio when the library just isn't there, but also the obsession with kicking things like Spotify, Apple Music, and kicking lossy music, and forgetting about the absolute glorious sound we can get from 1644 Redbook through streaming, but also especially through CD players. I think CD players still have an enormous amount to offer us, especially if we have a revealing system or if we're looking for a better sounding digital transport. In trying to address the why do CD transports seem to offer us so much? One reason why the PS Audio, the Hegel, and to a lesser extent the Pro-Ject upstairs, one reason why I think they sound so good is that they are not networked. And that means they're not pulling electrical noise from a router, or they're not pulling RFI from the air either through Wi-Fi or through an Ethernet cable. We should also acknowledge the expense of these CD transports. The PS Audio is as costly as the Innuos server streamer. The Hegel is quite a bit more expensive than the Brooklyn Bridge and the Wyred for Sound service streamer. But it's not just the playback hardware we have to consider in terms of expense. We have to consider the media itself. Streaming is effectively free. CDs are not. And also, we need storage space for these things. We need to be able to put them somewhere. And this is as big of a footprint as is taken up by my Roon Nucleus server in the kitchen, plus the hard drive on the side. So once we double these, we're already into more physical real estate than streaming ever demands from us. And then when we move house, we have to take all our CDs with us. Streaming, we just carry this much. CDs, we have boxes and boxes. It's not as inconvenient as vinyl, that's for sure. I mean, my vinyl collection's still mostly stuck in Melbourne for that very reason. But CDs still take up physical space in our lives. Some people like that, some people don't like that. But I think the real sucker punch for me is that this Hegel Mohican easily outperforms my Rega Planar 2 with the Zu cartridge attached to the PS Audio Phono stage. It's better in terms of dynamics, in terms of punch, slam, tonal color, finesse. I find that quite extraordinary. If you think that this is a bit of a joke or that I'm pulling your leg, I would invite you to look at what's behind me here. I've spent the last 2 months buying CDs, new and secondhand, from Amazon Discogs, because I'm so impressed with the sound of the CD transports that I have available in my house. But that does not mean I'm giving up on streaming or on vinyl. I'm just saying it's one extra thing that I enjoy. And really my message here is that, yes, the mainstream are walking away from CDs, but I think audiophiles should ignore CDs at their peril. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to you?